Thank you all for joining us. My name is Tanika Nicholas, and on behalf of the Justice Reform Partnership, we would like to thank all of you for joining us for this evening Talk Tuesdays webinar. If this is your first time joining us, thank you. And for those of you who continue to join us, thank you for supporting us for these important conversations. We're continuing to let folks in, so thank you all for joining us again. So, again, if this is your first time joining us, I like to always share a little bit about the Justice Reform Partnership, or the JRP, we like to call it. We started off as just 5 organizations back in 2017, and we've grown to well over 90 organizations and individuals working within the state of Georgia. Our partnership has grown vastly over the years, and we have grassroots organizations. We have directly impacted folks within our coalition. We have community organizers. We have policy experts, all working to create a more just and equitable system to work for criminal and juvenile justice reforms within the state of Georgia. One of the things about our Talk Justice Tuesdays that a lot of people ask, what is Talk Justice Tuesdays? Well, it's our now yearly system that we created that just started off this year in May to kind of talk about policy and legislative changes that started out at the state capitol. But now we've kind of, stretched it out because of our attendees. They wanted to hear more about topics and things that were important to them. And so what we are using now are community partners like All of Us and None, Change in Motion, to hear about things that are important for our people who are directly impacted. So, one of the conversations we're going to have tonight around prison slavery, I'm not going to get too much into it. I'm going to let our experts talk about it. But, Talk Justice Tuesday, we like to break down complex policy issues. We like to hear about issues that are important to our directly impacted communities, our folks who are impacted by the criminal legal system. We like to share real actionable strategies for advocacy. How are we going to work together to create change? Tonight's conversation, we're going to dive into criminalized by design, addressing and disrupting how do we feed the machine. We'll dig into real drivers and mass incarceration, solutions to end practice of prison slavery, something I know personally about as a directly impacted person who was working for free while I was incarcerated. So we'll talk about some things that we are going to dive into as a member of All of Us and None Georgia chapter, and the barriers that folks face when they're reentering society. So before I get too much into the agenda, I want to introduce one of our All of Us and None Atlanta chapter members, Taramika Thomas. Taramika is going to ground us tonight, give us some instructions about, our topics, some of our housekeeping. Taramika is going to also dive us into our panelists and 2 of our coalition partners who are going to be facilitating our conversation tonight. All of Us and None Atlanta chapter and Change in Motion. So Taramika, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Welcome tonight. Again, I am Taramika. I am in the All of Us or None Georgia chapter, and I am going to be your facilitator tonight. I also facilitate a monthly support group every second Wednesday of the month called Our Time. You're welcome to sign up and support that as well. That is for family members who have family or loved ones who are currently incarcerated and those that are returning home, just to give them the support that they need. So before we proceed, I would like to remind you of a few housekeeping things. Please keep yourself on mute if you're not speaking, and your camera's off if there is something going on in the background that we all should not see. Question and answers will take place after both of the panelists are done with their presentation. However, if you have a question beforehand, before the Q&A, if you could just please drop it in the chat and we'll respond to them either in the chat or at the end during the Q&A. This event will be recorded and later uploaded to JRP's website. Everyone in attendance will also receive all chat drops, and any presentations that the panelists would like to make available. We will now hear from Erin, who will give you an intro to Change in Motion.
Thanks, Taramika. Appreciate it. My name's Erin Kilpatrick. I am a member of the Georgia chapter of All of Us Are None, and I'm here to let you know about the great work that Change in Motion is doing. Change in Motion was founded in 2020. It was born from a bold vision to restore, empower, and mobilize communities from the inside out. Change in Motion is a faith-rooted, community-based organization committed to transforming lives by empowering generations, building strong communities, and dismantling systemic barriers. Grounded in the principles of Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 17, Change in Motion seeks to restore hope, rebuild foundations, and empower individuals with the tools, support, and opportunities needed to thrive. Through mentorship, education, and advocacy, they are dedicated to creating a future where every person can rise above adversity and step into their full potential. Their motto for Change in Motion is building the walls of our community by building the lives of our people. Change in Motion was founded by Lease, Youmans, who brings a deep commitment to seeing people whole, empowered, and walking in their purpose. With lived experience, spiritual insight, and a passion for justice, Lisa has turned pain into purpose and brokenness into blueprints for change. Her work is fueled by a belief that transformation starts within and that rebuilding communities begins by rebuilding the lives within them. Lisa's leadership is guided by faith, shaped by resilience, and driven by the belief that every life holds value and every person has a part to play in shaping a better world. On Thursday, August 21st at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Change in Motion will host a free and virtual panel discussion called Identity Theft. Who told you you were naked? That will explore identity theft, how systems, trauma, and silence have distorted the identity of Black men. You can register and see sponsorship levels at the link dropped in the chat. Yes, so it's dropped right there just now. I will now, I'm sorry. I'll read it out loud so everyone gets it. So again, Change in Motion, their event will be Thursday, August 21st at 6:30 p.m. Register and or sponsor at https://identitytheft.eventbrite.com. I will now turn it over to Shaniqua, who will tell you a little bit more about us at All of Us Are None, Georgia.
Thanks, Erin. Hello, everyone. I am Shaniqua Bonvillian. I am a member of All of Us Are None, Georgia. All of Us Are None is the community organizing and membership-based arms of legal services for prisoners with children. And as a member of the Abolish Bondage Collectivity, or ABC, campaign working to eradicate structural racism and erase vestiges of slavery, is a grassroots civil and human rights organization fighting for the right of formerly and currently incarcerated people and our families. We are fighting against the discrimination that people face every day because of arrest or conviction history. The goal of All of Us Are None is to strengthen the voice of the people most affected by mass incarceration and the growth of the prison industrial complex. Throughout our grassroots organizing, we are building a powerful political movement to win full restoration of our human and civil rights. The Georgia chapter started in 2022 by activist and organizer Waleisah Wilson Menifee, because she's married now, is based out of Atlanta and is open to anyone in Georgia. who has a loved one incarcerated in Georgia or just interested in mobilizing on Georgia reform issues. You can connect with the chapter, learn about our work, screenings, and our current campaign to end prison slavery. Request speaker, host a screening, or register to attend our upcoming event through the links being dropped in the chat right now. So thank you. I will now turn it over to tonight's moderator, Taramika.
Hello again. All right. So thank you, Shaniqua. Good to see you as always. I'll be your moderator tonight. Again, I'm with the chapter. And thanks again for joining us in this important conversation. Now that you've heard about the missions of Change in Motion and the Georgia chapter, All of Us or None, let us meet the ladies who started these spaces. Lisa Youmans and Waleisah Wilson-Menifee. Welcome, ladies. We will start with Lisa, who has a presentation she would like to share with us.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you again for joining us on this evening. And I'm going to go ahead and begin sharing my screen here for everyone. Okay, so just let me know when we're able to see.
We see it.
Okay. Is it still on the main view, Waleisah, or is it? Okay. So again, welcome everyone. And our topic again tonight is criminalized by design, addressing and disrupting systems that feed this machine, which is the prison industrial complex. And I'm going to be speaking of systemic barriers that actually feed the machine. And then Waleisah will come in and talk about the prison industrial complex. And I do want to open up with this by sharing a story concerning these barriers and how they operate. So Marcus was 15, a high school sophomore in a school with more security officers, guidance counselors. One afternoon, he got into a shouting match in the hallway, which was just a teenage outburst, which in another zip code might have earned detention. Here, it earned him handcuffs from the school resource officer, a charge for disorderly conduct, and a court date. He missed classes for hearings, his grades sank, and though the charge was eventually dropped, now had a record and the system had a record of Marcus. Then there's Denise. She worked steadily for 20 years in retail until her store closed. Without a paycheck, she fell behind in rent. Her and her teenage daughter ended up sleeping in their car. One night, a police officer knocked on her window, and instead of referral to housing services, she got a citation for illegal camping. When she missed court due to the fact that she was working a temp shift, a warrant was issued. The warrant led to arrest, jail time, job loss, and closed doors at every apartment she applied to. Marcus's crime was a hallway argument. Denise's was poverty. Different ages, different circumstances, but both fed into the same conveyor belt: poverty, housing instability, underfunded schools, and mental health stress, which turned into criminal records instead of community support. This isn't rare, it isn't random, it's by design. So what are systemic barriers? Systemic barriers are policies, practices, and structures within a system that create and maintain inequalities for certain groups. These barriers are not isolated incidents, but rather deeply embedded within the system, leading to unequal access to resources, opportunities, and power based on factors like race, gender, class, and disability. They can affect various aspects of life, including employment, healthcare, education, and social mobility. So the first systemic barrier that we're going to speak about is the school to prison pipeline. The school to prison pipeline is a practice of students being funneled out of public schools and into juvenile and criminal justice systems. The pipeline disproportionately affects students of color, students with disabilities, and students experiencing poverty or other vulnerabilities. And some key aspects of the school to prison pipeline are increased reliance on law enforcement in schools, harsh disciplinary practices, lack of support and resources. And the way it's linked to incarceration is that suspension, expulsion, and involvement in the juvenile justice system can disrupt a student's education, making them more vulnerable to future involvement in the criminal legal system. Systemic barrier number 2, tough on crime laws and mandatory sentences. These laws and sentences, they constrain judicial discretion, deepen racial disparities in the criminal legal system, and cause far-reaching harm to individuals, families, and communities. Mandatory minimums are legal provisions in each state and the federal government that require a specific minimum prison term for certain crimes, regardless of individual circumstances. They can include mandatory prison sentences for drug-related crimes and longer mandatory minimum sentences for violent crimes and repeat or habitual offenses. Also, the 3 strike laws that lengthen sentences require minimum sentences of 25 years to life imprisonment for some and usually serious offenses. And then the truth in sentencing laws, which require people to serve most of their sentences, typically 85% before eligibility for release. And I do want to make a note here that in recent years, some of the reforms that came about was that almost half of all states, as well as the federal government, have reduced or eliminated some mandatory minimums related to drug offenses. Systemic barrier number 3, pretrial money bail and detention. So money bail keeps legally innocent people in jail before trial simply because they cannot afford to pay. So on any given day, more than 2/3 of people in jail, and that's more than 400,000 people, are stuck behind bars while they wait for their day in court. Most of them are there simply because they cannot afford to pay the bail. And because of the fact of this fact alone, they can spend days, months, and even years in jail. Research shows that even 2 days in jail can make it more likely for someone to lose their job, housing, or custody of their children, and increase the likelihood that they will be arrested again in the future. So our system of cash bail is actually counterproductive to achieving public safety. Systemic barrier number 4, mental health neglect. So mental health needs are often criminalized rather than treated. The relationship between mental health and the criminal justice system is complex and multifaceted, with individuals experiencing mental health conditions significantly overrepresented in the justice system. This overrepresentation is not necessarily due to higher likelihood of committing crimes, but rather due to the lack of adequate mental health care and the system's reliance on incarceration as a default response to mental health crisis. And some key issues concerning this particular barrier in mental health is the overrepresentation piece. A large percentage of people in jails and prisons have been diagnosed with a mental health disorder, often without receiving adequate treatment while they're in prison. Criminalization. Individuals with mental health conditions may be arrested for behaviors related to their illness, such as erratic behavior or public disturbances, rather than for violent crimes. And then recidivism. Without proper treatment, individuals with mental health conditions are more likely to reoffend and return to the criminal justice system. And here we can just see some stats on mental health conditions and people that are being incarcerated because of their mental health conditions. And then systemic barrier number 5, criminalizing poverty. And I'm going to give two examples here. And we spoke about this with the niece in our story. She was criminalized because of her poverty and because of her situation and circumstance that she found herself in. So almost every state has at least one law that bans activities people experiencing homelessness engaged in simply to survive. And these laws can prohibit panhandling, loitering, living in vehicles, or sharing food and water in public spaces, all discriminate against people experiencing homelessness. And also, with this criminalizing poverty, fines are a monetary punishment. They are imposed when a case is resolved, either by plea or conviction. Fees exist solely to collect money for government operations, and even people who have not been convicted of any offense can incur these monetary punishment. And some example of these fees are court-appointed attorney fees, jail booking and processing fees, jail boarding fees, and also drug testing fees. These are just a few of the fees that an individual can incur. And so if people cannot afford to pay, they will almost certainly face more fines, more fees, jail time, and a host of other consequences. So recent studies show that fines and fees are an ineffective way to raise revenue, and some jurisdictions have spent about as much or more attempting to collect the criminal legal system debt and jailing people who could not pay than they actually recoup. And then finally, how can we dismantle or begin to dismantle some of these barriers? Number one, remove police from schools and fund counselors and restorative justice. Number two, repeal mandatory minimums, restore judicial discretion, end cash bail and increase pretrial services with community supervision, audit and restrict private contracts from profit from incarceration, and then invest in housing, jobs, and mental health services, decriminalize survival. So that's it for my portion of this presentation, and I'm going to turn it over to Waleisah so she can actually talk about the machine, which is the prison industrial complex.
Well, thank you, Lisa, for that very, very informative presentation. And like Lisa said, there are all these things that are put in place, really, that clearly all of this, the system is broken. That doesn't even exist. The system is not broken. The system is doing exactly what it's meant to do, which is lock people up, harm communities, particularly poor communities, particularly Black communities and other communities of folks who are seen on the outskirts, which includes folks who are disabled, includes people who are on the sex registry, includes folks who are in the rural areas. So it is doing exactly what it's doing. And that's why I'm loving the fact that as when we decided to do this, we need to talk about what it is and what it is. It is criminalized by design. And so I'll go ahead and start sharing my screen. Let's see here. Okay. And I'm gonna move this little thing. It gets on my last nerve on my end. Okay. So before we get started, I am Waleisah Wilson. Like I said, I'm the chapter lead. There was no Georgia chapter of All of Us Are None, which is a national organization based out of California. And there are chapters throughout the United States, and there was not a Georgia chapter. There's also not an Alabama chapter. And so I was actually contacted from someone from the national chapter to start a Georgia chapter because of a lot of the challenges that sad that other folks across the country were seeing happening in Georgia. And that is a really bad sign when folks know it's so bad in Georgia when they're calling saying what we need to do to help you all get something here. And that's just not a good look. So we started this chapter out, and one of the first things that, even though we do advocate, and we just don't have the manpower right now, a lot of time, or the resources, because all of us are volunteers. We're not, being funded by some large grant. It is a group of dedicated, it's about 45 chapter members, but about 15 of us are the ones who are really putting in a lot of the work. And we kind of had to really narrow down with some of the major issues. Some of the issues that we do talk about are probation and parole, fines and fees, these ankle monitoring, the fees of that, as well as school to prison pipeline. But at that time, this was in 2022, one of the biggest things that came on the ballot, it was actually on Georgia's ballot, as one of the Democratic questions. As a Georgia voter, would you like to see the ending of prison slavery or something? So we decided to go with that momentum, since that was already on the Georgia ballot. And that is what we started to do. So a lot of folks don't know. A lot of people are misguided in thinking that the 13th Amendment ended slavery. It did not. It basically stripped off that look and put on a whole different dress, but it's still the same thing. Whether you want to go, like I say, the new um, plantations are now the new prisons. The overseers now the COs. So it's the same thing. It's just a whole different century. So we're not having to deal with Jim Crow. We're now dealing with his great great grandchildren, Jimmy and Jessica. So it's still the same thing. So right now, I just want to show you all, take 2 minutes to show you all our campaign video that we launched a couple of years ago, just to give folks a little information about what it is. I think some people tend to cringe when they hear the word slavery. Well, we're not slaves. We're not being whipped in the fields. There's more ways to cause someone pain than by whipping them. And to be honest with you, no, a lot of folks may not be getting whipped in the fields, but there are still people right now who are picking cotton in fields with a white man with a gun on a horse. And if you can vision some images that you would see back in the 1800s, and vision that in 2025, a field of black men picking cotton with a white man on a horse with a gun, it is the same thing. It's just a different year. And so we just want to be able to say, okay, since you're not believing, we want to tell you what this does. And not just so much to say of folks who say, well, they did the crime, they ought to do the time. That is not the issue. I myself am formerly incarcerated. When the judge sentenced me to do my time, he didn't say nothing about me standing outside in 110-degree heat, busting up rocks for no reason, without pay, knowing that I had children that needed bills to be paid, knowing that whatever in a space with other folks who had restitution and they had children that needed school, but nothing my sentence said that. Prison is the punishment. Me being away from society, me being away from the luxuries that I had on the outside, me being forced to work for free as a slave, when you're literally using contracts to sell my labor to a city government or to a construction company, and you're literally selling my labor to them in exchange for $40,000 or $50,000. There's nowhere in anybody's mind where you cannot say that's not slavery. That's literally an auction block, and it's not human trafficking. And this is something I just wanted to be able to put it in folks' mind, that when we always talk about sex trafficking and human trafficking, we always talk about it on one spectrum, but we completely forget the fact that prison slave labor is human trafficking at its worst, because you are literally taking human beings and you are selling them and their bodies and their labor to other folks, and you're making a profit off of it. There's no difference. And since you want to talk about the sex, for those who don't know, there are folks in prison who are forced and raped every day. For profit by COs and by other folks who are up in the upper echelons. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about prison labor. So I'm going to go ahead and show you this 2-minute video. And when you get a chance, we're going to make sure we drop the links in the chat. Please like and subscribe to our YouTube pages, as well as share these videos with folks, because eventually our goal is to get to be one of those folks like Colorado and other states who have removed slavery from their state law and no longer say we participate in slavery. So throw a thumbs up, Lisa, since you're the one that I can see, if you can actually see the video and hear it. Can you see it and hear it?
So I can see it, but it's a little choppy.
Okay, let me see if I optimize for video sharing. Let me see. Now, what about now?
Jail sentence into enslavement.
Can you hear it?
That's better. Yeah.
Okay. Let me start
Let's
it over.
look at what's happening. More and more jobs are being filled by incarcerated people who are not paid to do them. This takes jobs away from the rest of the state and turns a jail sentence into enslavement. Let's look at what's happening. The 13th Amendment makes slavery illegal, except as a punishment for crime. This means that it's legal for prisons to make money by forcing incarcerated people to work for free and outsourcing that labor to different companies. But forced labor goes beyond fair punishment for breaking the law. Being forced through violence and retaliation to work for no pay, sometimes in dangerous situations, is a violation of basic human rights. Incarcerated workers are excluded from basic workplace protections, so they can be sent with minimal training to work in unsafe conditions without protective gear that would be standard in other workplaces. Corrections departments and local governments market enslavement as a benefit to taxpayers. In fact, it's a detriment to taxpayers and job seekers who were denied those same jobs and left unemployed. And many of the companies that use slave labor won't hire employees with a criminal record. So you could do a job for years for free and then not get hired to do it for a paycheck. Because it's so hard to find a job, formerly incarcerated people are often forced to rely on public benefits that taxpayers pay for. We all deserve to be treated with dignity and paid a fair wage for our work, whether we're incarcerated or not. The good news is, the people have the power to change Georgia's constitution and make modern-day slavery illegal. Call your legislators, visit our website, and share this video with a friend. Together, we can end slavery in Georgia.
Okay. When that was our little campaign video, and I wanted to make it clear before I go through the rest of my presentation that our campaign is not about let's keep prison slavery, let's pay people. It is not about paying people, because we all know that we can be slick and say we want people to be paid, and they'll say, oh, we can pay them, let's give them $1.16 an hour. We're not talking about paying folks. We're talking about it needs to be ended, because prison, getting free slave labor is at the root why folks are actually being incarcerated as opposed to giving alternative sentencing. When you are sentencing a woman who has gone into a grocery store and she's stolen a couple packs of chicken and some diapers and some milk for her babies, and you choose to lock her up as opposed to giving her chicken and diapers and milk and maybe some community service so she can do whatever she needs to do, but you choose to lock her up for 5 years, you're doing it with the sole intention of getting free slave labor. And so I want to make it very clear that, yes, we want folks, yes, and that is actually very true. Very clear that, yes, folks should be getting paid. We should not have folks working at Amazon right next to another individual who's at Amazon making $28 an hour. We're standing right next to them making the exact same product and getting zero. We should not be working out here in South Brunswick as firefighters, running up in other people's houses, saving them from fires and dying, or being the best that we can be as firefighters, only to get out and be told by the city of Brunswick that we can't be firefighters because we have a felony conviction. We should not have to be somewhere working as a garbage man on the back of a trash truck. And if you'll notice, I did point out Clayton County and Muskogee County. Muskogee County is in Columbus and turns out the most slaves than any other location that's in throughout the state of Georgia. Almost 600 people who are working from in the courthouse, doing your clerk's paperwork, doing everything possible to say that the city's saving money But in fact, you're actually hurting the folks who could be using those jobs and getting paid on the outside with those jobs, including people who are in the jail. That when they work this job, that is the purpose of saying we have these work training programs to train folks so that they can do that job and transition right into that job when they get out. But when you are choosing to give folks life sentences for selling less than $30 worth of crack, and you're locking folks up for survival type crimes or offenses, you're doing it for the sole purpose of let's getting free labor. And I'm personally sick and tired of them using it as that is what their punishment be for committing a crime. And they should not get paid. And to be honest with you, if I was a victim, and I have been a victim before, I would be truly pissed off as a victim, knowing that a person owes me $30,000 in restitution, and they in there working as mechanics on your buses and doing everything else around the state working, and you're not paying them so that they can pay me back my money for what they did to owe me my restitution. And then again, it hurts the children. A lot of the folks who are being incarcerated were the primary breadwinners. So for this state to always say we love our children, we'll lock a woman up if she wants to have an abortion, but then when those same children get in foster care, we don't want to take care of them. We love the children so much, but when they commit a crime, we don't care if they're being beaten up or raped or misabused in prison. And when those same children that you saved from being aborted are on death row, you have no problem with them being executed. So we need to stop talking out of both sides of our head and just look at the fact and just call a spade a spade. Involuntary servitude is slavery. You can call it what you want to call it to make yourself feel good, but it's nothing but slavery, and it's not about folks getting paid. It ought to be optional. Oh, if I just want to get out of my cell to do some work, that should be my choice. But I should not be punished. And when I was like, wait a minute, you want me to get out? And at this time, I was 650 pounds. I was a woman, a sexual assault survivor while I was in prison, and I'm being checked while new around men. You and disabled and on a walker. You want me to get out and work in a ditch in the sun for free for 14 hours, and I only get lunch after working 6 hours, and that's half of a sandwich, a room temperature bottled water, and an apple with some worms crawling out of it? That's less than what a child gets in kindergarten. But then if I was to pass out and die, you're not going to give me anything, because people in prison are not, folks in prison don't have the legal right to unionize. And I've seen it too many times where folks are working on the back of trash trucks, get their arms cut off or lose a leg because they're working as a slave for the state. And guess what? They go to the doctor. If it was anybody else on the street that got their arm cut off, they probably would be in the emergency room for about a good 2 weeks until they got healed and taken care of and given all the medicine they want. But when you're incarcerated, they're gonna probably put you in there 1 day, 2 days. If that, they're finna throw you right back in a nasty prison. And guess what? You got to go to the doctor to get followed up. And guess what? They're gonna charge you $5 to $10 to go see the doctor. And you was out on somebody else's job on the city dumping trash for them for free. So these are the dirty sides that folks don't want you to see. When Clayton County, Muskogee County, and all these counties have it on their website saying, look at what we're doing with our inmates, which is not a respectful word. We've got them working and doing this. We got them working and doing that. What they should be saying is, we have them working at Victoria's Secret, making them underwear. We have them working at Starbucks, where you buy your $9 cups of coffee. We have them answering cell phones at Verizon Wireless call center. So when you went to go try to apply for Verizon on the outside looking for a job, Verizon told you they're not hiring. No, they ain't gonna hire you. They're not gonna pay you $15, $18 an hour to answer the phone when they can get a slave to do it for free. So this needs to be an issue. This is not a Republican issue. This is not a Democrat issue. This is a people issue. This is a community issue, because these jobs, people gonna do what they need to do to survive and thrive. And you cannot survive, and you certainly cannot thrive if you do not have a job, you do not have a place to stay, and you don't have opportunities for upward mobility. So if you give folks the jobs that they need, they've been working in your prison for 15 years as an auto mechanic, diesel mechanic. They should be able to get out here, and you should be able to give them that same job that they have been doing. And you should be able to hire folks on the outside to be able to get that job. But I just want to run real quickly through hold on a minute, my other little slides, and I know I went longer, so some of them I'm going to cut out. Because I get so passionate about this because I just do not like when folks do folks wrong. So again, like I said, call it what it is. It's slavery. Did you know? Let me go back. Did you know that it did not end? It actually evolved. It's that the incarceration, there are incarcerated people and those on probation and parole. And I want to make it also clear, this is not something that also impacts folks that's in prison. This thing that we call probation and parole is just as exploitive and ankle monitoring, because folks in Georgia has the longest prison sentence. They'll send you to prison at the age of 14, let you get out at the age of 60, and put you on probation till you die. That means they have literally gotten 60 to 70 years of free slave labor and money from you. There have been people who have had something that normally would have been a $60 fine, and it turns out to be $2,500 throughout all the fines and the fees. That's ridiculous, and it makes no sense. And people who are on probation, I mean, people who are currently incarcerated, actually make over $12 billion of, that's what it be now, worth of goods and services, and make as little as 3 cents an hour. And be very clear, folks in Georgia don't make anything. There's one small location in Georgia that I hear that I didn't have the privilege of working on. And from my understanding, the women there probably make less than 14 cents an hour, but then they got to turn around and pay for their own lunch, which is crappy, plus room and board, as if it was by choice for them to go to the prison. I personally feel if you're going to lock somebody up, you ought to take on the cost. That's like asking me out on a date and trying to make me pay for the tab. That is just wrong and disrespectful, if you ask me. So 4,000 companies and government entities profit from this legalized slavery. They call it punishment and involuntary servitude to make it sound good, but when in fact, it is just slavery. Again, over $11 billion a year in goods and services are produced by folks who are currently incarcerated. Over 4,100 companies profit from it. Investors and companies make hundreds of billions of dollars off slavery and mass incarceration. And it drains taxpayers out of $182 billion a year. Incarcerated workers in Georgia are not paid. They're not protected by unions. And we are punished when we refuse to work as slaves. And when you use incarcerated labor, it takes away from jobs that can be paid to people in the community. And that just talks about the actual law right now. That is the Georgia law, which is in the Georgia Constitution, Article 1, Section 1, paragraph 22. It currently states involuntary servitude. There should be no involuntary servitude within the state of Georgia except as a punishment for crime after legal conviction. That is the problem. That is the loophole. So when the 13th Amendment came out and they said, there's no slavery, the slaves are free. And then there was that loophole that said, except without a punishment of a crime. It's no coincidence that these little things called the black codes came out. Because it's like, oh, we can have slavery. We just got to give them a felony first. Oh, we can make sure they don't vote. We got to give them a felony first. That's where all this stuff came from. And working without wages is slavery. You wouldn't go on a job and not work for free. That's called being a volunteer. But being a volunteer is also voluntary. You can work when you want to and not. And so this just talks a little bit more about how these amount of wages are being stolen. And as a taxpayer, Georgians and throughout the United States, taxpayers pay $182 billion to incarcerate people and to operate jails and prisons. So imagine what $182 billion could go to as far as not educating, but doing things that cause less harm, things that give people substance use treatment, mental health treatment, diversion programs, literacy programs that will give benefit to people instead of taking away. So the origins of slavery and involuntary servitude have never been based on rehabilitation or justice, but antiquated, racist, and inhumane policies that are intended to hold on to racist, profit-driven practice for the sole purpose of enslaving and oppressing Black and brown people, and that includes poor white folks too. So you can do your part by contacting your legislator and letting them know that this is not something that you want to be a part of. You want to end slavery in Georgia. And again, as I talked about you in the beginning, I asked you to just picture the one that's on the lower left on the bottom. This is what it looked like back in the day. But it's no different than what's on the right of what it's looking like today. Those images were captured, I think, down in Louisiana, of a bunch of black men in the field on the left. And most of you saw those movies, you know, all those kind of slave movies where there's a white man on a horse. It is the exact same thing. A bunch of black men in the field with a white man with a gun. Same thing. And Georgia depends on it so bad that it actually found ways to exploit the loophole in the 13th Amendment. And again, that's called the Black Codes. These were laws that would lock folks up and give black folks criminal charges for doing things such as walking on the grass, being unemployed. If you were found to be unemployed, you would go to jail. Selling flour and other petty offenses such as vagrancy, stealing food, or in order to ensure a guaranteed and free slave labor workforce. Because mind you, once the Abolition Amendment passed, a lot of folks got scared because they were like, well, who gonna breastfeed my children now? Who gonna clean my house now? Who gonna pick my car? Instead of saying, you know what, I guess I better just get up off my own lazy behind and do my work myself, they didn't want to do that. They found ways to enslave, keep the so-called free black people slaves by coming up with black codes. And if you think about it, black men considered profit. When you would see and think about those movies where they would have black folks on the auction blocks, they're looking in their mouth, they're telling them to form muscles, they're looking at their back. A lot of it was to make sure that they were able to work. And if you notice, black Georgians were in prison at a rate more than 12 times that of whites. And black men were most likely to be in prison in the convict leasing system to fulfill white Southerners' need for strong agricultural laborers. It's nothing but blood money, because again, over 4,100 corporations profit from mass incorporation in the United States, and people actually lobby for policies that maximize prison populations to keep their pockets full. Today, there are throughout the United States tons of organizations, companies that are profiting off of it. And I know you can't really see it, but Georgia's right up in here. And this was a waste treatment, but we're going to drop the link in the chat of where you can actually see the different states and a few examples of those places that use it. And over here, if you're shopping at Costco, Pfizer, you got AT&T, Whole Foods, McDonald's, Chevron Gas, Bank of America, and certainly Starbucks, you are supporting slavery because all of those folks use prison slave labor. Again, the prison industry is worth $80 billion, includes thousands of corporations. And of course, we got Core Civic, Remington, McDonald's, Starbucks, T-Mobile, Wendy's, Amazon, and a lot of other people. And this is from Worth Rises, and we'll drop that link in the chat as well. So you can see a list of all the people that you are supporting and unknowingly support. And it's not something that you may not even want to be spending your money on. That support that. So 90,000 people are incarcerated in Georgia, most of whom are black men. You can see why Georgia refused to let go of its capitalistic and racist roots of slavery to put people over profit. This further explains, instead of investing in ending mass incarceration, why Georgia's governor 2 years ago, instead of ending mass incarcerated, has put over $600 million to build 2 new prisons. So tomato, plantation prison, involuntary servitude, or slavery, it's all the same because black Georgians are treated disproportionately in policing and sentencing and thus are overrepresented in the jail and prison systems. The correlation between slavery, the exploiting of the exception of the 13th Amendment, the creation of black codes, and today's explosive incarceration population can no longer be ignored. Today's jails and prisons are no more than plantations and slave auction blocks for the sole purpose of profiting off black bodies, mainly black men, for free slave labor. But change is coming. Our goal here at All of Us Are None Georgia chapter is to amend our chapter law that simply says neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist in Georgia, period. And of course, there is a federal movement to have it done on a federal level. And so we'll make sure we drop that link as well. In 2021, they're trying to put it in the federal. and which I found out I didn't know, I always thought federal trump state, but from my knowledge and what I'm told, that if they do pass something federally, the state can say, well, we don't want to pay attention to that, and we're going to do it Georgia. So I get that question all the time. Well, Waleisah, why is the Georgia chapter worried about trying to work about this on a state level when you have Representative Nakima Williams and other folks trying to do it on a federal level? I have two answers for you. Because Georgia does not have to go with what the federal law says. Two, because it's not impacting them and they can move at their own pace. And quite frankly, I think they're just moving a little too slow. So we want to go ahead and do what we need to do in Georgia, because folks in Georgia can't wait on people who are not in the same situation, have not experienced what we experienced, to decide that they want to just work on this issue 9 to 5 or a couple days out of the month when they are available. This is nothing to them, but they're not invested in it the way that we are. So that is why we decided to do what Colorado and a lot of other states have already done, and they did it on their own. So we just ask you all to connect with us, and of course, fill out our petition that we have on change.com. I think we're short 12 signatures before we reach 200. But we want to be able to end slavery in Georgia, to let them know this is not something that we support, and that is actually causing more harm to our communities and into our state. Thank you so much.
Brings me. You ready for your Q&A?
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Waleisah, for those slides and the information. A lot of us didn't know that. I appreciate all the information. We have now reached our Q&A portion, and we'll open up for questions. We will start with questions that have been dropped in the chat that haven't been able to be answered yet, and via a speaker. And then we will call on those who raised their hand. If you could, please raise your hand so we can answer you one at a time for whatever questions you may have. Raise your hand by going to the reactions area on your screen. You click on your picture, reactions will pull up. And then while our team identifies the first question from the audience, I would like to ask Lisa, if you have had to prioritize one systematic factor or barrier to address first, which one would make a big difference?
So that would be addressing the systemic barrier of poverty and access to opportunity, because access to opportunity is the foundation within our families for stable families. And when that is removed, like everything else just becomes easier to deal with, because poverty, it really fuels all of the other systemic barriers. So take, for instance, like education, children in poverty, they often attend underfunded schools. Concerning housing, family without stable income are more likely to face eviction and homelessness, and also living in unsafe conditions. When we talk about mental health, the stress of financial insecurity can trigger or worsen anxiety, depression, and cause trauma responses. And then poverty concerning criminalization of survival, people in poverty are more likely to be penalized for activities tied to meeting basic needs, from loitering and unpaid fines. So when poverty is reduced and opportunity is accessible, parents can focus on long-term goals and not just the bills or the expenses that they need to take care of. Children can learn without constant weight of instability, and also improving academic performance and future prospects. And concerning health outcomes, that will improve because stress-related illnesses and neglected care decrease. And also communities build resistance or resilience as economic stability allows more people to contribute to local solutions. So again, it would be poverty, I think, will be a great place to start, when we're talking about tackling these systemic barriers.
Thank you. I did not see any questions in the chat per se.
I think Beverly asked one question that was about contacting your legislator. And yes, for those of you who are out of state who may have Georgia loved ones, a lot of folks don't know. I'm gonna drop another tidbit. Folks in prison are counted in the census. So for instance, you have a loved one, and I'm just throwing these numbers out. You have a loved one that's from Fulton County, Atlanta. Let's say a very part city. I'm just gonna name it Apple Bottom, Georgia. And Apple Bottom, Georgia doesn't have any parks for their kids. They don't have, you know, public pools. They don't have playgrounds. Their children don't have books. I mean, it is very poor of the poor. The census is one of those tools that folks use, that the government use to bring money into your community based on what you need. So if Apple Bottom doesn't have a lot of handicap accessible parking spots, they don't have recreational centers. These are things that you're counting in the census. But let's say Apple Bottom, Georgia has 12,000 of their actual residents and citizens locked up somewhere near Savannah, Georgia at Coastal State Prison. And when the census comes out, guess where that money that would have been going for those 12,000 Apple Bottom residents, guess where that money's going to? That money's going to the county of the prison that they're in, as opposed to the county that should be getting it where they're from. So if one, you're being counted as in the sense that you're a citizen. Two, if you're a citizen, this is a whole nother issue, but you should never even have your vote taken whether you're in jail or not. Because if you're going to take my vote while I'm incarcerated, you should not be getting money based on my body sitting in a prison or a jail in your county. So these are all issues that are intertwined. So I would recommend, and I dropped a different link. I know someone else dropped a link as well, to just go and contact the legislator who is in that area, and let them know that, you know, whatever issues you may have with what's going on, whether that's issues that's going on into the jail system, or particularly about slave labor, but you can just find it. But you would definitely find it with someone with the county that they're living in. And I forgot to mention, I know I wanted to go in more detail about actually calling out the companies that are utilizing prison slavery. We are actually hosting an event. Taramika, if you're able to drop that information if you haven't already. We're having an event on August 28th, which is the last Thursday of this month at 7 p.m. And it's going to be a 1-hour virtual event where we'll be screening a documentary that I did a couple of years ago on the same issue. That has caused some heated debate, but I don't mind it. Particularly from folks that I actually featured in the film and called out. And I believe in being bold when you're doing stuff. There's no need of, throwing a rock and hiding my hand. Muskogee County, Columbus, Georgia knows that they're using a lot of slaves. Clayton County knows they're using a lot of slaves. And these are some of the information that we did in my 14-minute documentary that points this out. So we're going to be having a documentary and a screening on the last Thursday in August. And we specifically chose that day since that is the Labor Day weekend. And everybody's going to be getting their barbecue and partying on and celebrating Labor Day. And it'll probably be paid. But we want you all to acknowledge that while you are celebrating, there are folks who are going to be working for free, not getting paid, in awful conditions. I don't know if you've been watching the news, but there are a lot of Georgia prisons that don't even have heat. And so we're going to be having that conversation on Zoom on August 28th. Do we say 6 or 7? Is it at 6 or 7? I want to make sure it's right. Let me make sure it's right. Is it at 6? I think we got it at 6. Yeah, 6 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So if you all can join us for that, we would love that you're able to join us for that. And with that, we'll actually have some call to actions for you all to do that weekend, as well as give out more names of some of the folks. I mean, a lot of folks didn't know that, somebody said, oh, they got folks in prison making withdrawals. Yep, they make you Victoria's Secret. They're making wax. They're making all kinds of stuff. And it really would make you so mad that literally a lot of the places that you go to know that these folks are using it, from those little paper cups to the little cups, McDonald's bags, Walmart, all these folks or using labor, but these same people will turn around and say they can't hire people with a felony. So I'm gonna shut up because I think we see some hands up and have some questions.
Looks like Pastor Ron has his hand up.
Yeah, I don't really have a question, but I'd like to share a brief story on this topic, if I may. Is that okay?
Mhm.
I was incarcerated in Pennsylvania, and probably the world's oldest dungeon. Built in 1889 as a boys' prison. The cells were 6 by 8, designed for boys. They were housing 2 adult men in these cells, 6 by 8, 48 square feet. And out of 48 square feet, there was 2 bunks, a desk, a toilet, a sink. So you know how much floor space was left after that? Well, there's one block in that prison that has been condemned by the state since 1973. To this day, it still houses 400 men, even though it is condemned as unfit for human habitation. They pay a fine every year. They take it out of their right pocket and they put it in their left pocket, the state does. Where's the punishment? While I was there, they had a sewage backup in the basement of this block. This block is in such bad shape that the whole thing is literally held up by jack posts. If you know what jack posts are, metal posts that have cranks on them. They have to go down and crank them up every once in a while to keep the building up. That's what holds the building up. There's 400 men living in this thing. They had a sewage backup in there, 6 inches deep. They made inmates, incarcerated people, they made them go down there without any protective gear whatsoever and clean it up. I know one of the men that had to do it. He related the story to me. Is that cruel? Is that inhuman? But they made them do it. That is a hazardous waste spill. You don't go in there without hazmat suits. They made those prisoners go down there and clean that up without any protective gear whatsoever. And they got away with it.
And that is primarily, I wanted to, and I know I've talked to you in different, I think that's primarily because, again, folks who are incarcerated are seen as indispensable. They're indispensable, I guess is what you call it, indispensable, expendable, subhuman, without people even realizing that 94% of the people in prison are going to return home. There is no question about it. So when you treat people and say, oh, those folks are a bunch of criminals, they're a bunch of savages. Sometimes folks don't go to prison like that, but they leave like that. So when you make folks so hardened, you're only hurting yourself because, and we as a community, we should be really upset with folks inside of prison who are causing harm to folks inside of prison, because some of the folks that go in, they're the nicest people, regardless of what may have happened or circumstances that have led them there. But when people treat you wrong, you know that old saying, hurt people hurt people. Guess what? When they do get out, who are they going to be directing all of that anger and all of that bitterness to? Folks in the community. And they're getting it because they're being treated by folks who we have entrusted. And I say we because we say taxpayers, but who taxpayers have entrusted. You should be able to rehabilitate, correct, and do all of this stuff in a humane, respectful manner at the same time. When you're going to jail to be sentenced for something that will hopefully correct the behavior so that you become a better person. You're not going to jail to be sentenced to death when you were only supposed to be there for 5 months, or eaten up by bed bugs in the Fulton County Jail, or raped, or having your stuff stolen. That's not what jail is for. And I tell folks all the time, you better be careful what you say and wish on people, because when you dig one grave, you might as well dig 2, because it takes nothing nowadays for folks to get slapped with a felony. Well, I had a question for Lisa myself, and then we're going to close out. My question for Lisa is, let me see. think you answered the one you asked about prioritizing. How do we hold systems accountable for the inequities that we see? And what's the one thing we need to change to prevent generational system impact?
So the one thing I'll start with the second question. To present the generational impact, we can really start with dismantling the barrier of school to prison pipeline. So, and that's really like having a mindset of how do we resource and restore, and we'll be able to cut off the pipeline that it stores. So it's funding schools, because we know we have underfunded schools. So funding schools and not suspensions. That's housing families and not just jailing people because they're homeless or because they're in a situation or a circumstance that they had really no control over. Like going back to our story with the young lady named Denise at the beginning. Also treating mental illness and not prosecuting people with mental illness, and putting more people in place, like when there's someone is having a mental health crisis, that we're not calling the police. You can call 988. There are different things that you can do, and for that not to happen, because sometimes people may seem to be having like erratic behavior, but it's really they're just having like a mental health crisis or some type of mental breakdown. And then providing pathways to employment and not barriers to it. And you spoke a little bit about how people, the free prison labor, but when you come out, you're not able to receive a job at some of those same places that you work for, and just, tackling that particular issue right there from that standpoint also, which you did talk about earlier, Waleisah. And then holding the systems accountable. What we're doing here, we're partnering. Different organizations are coming together. We're partnering with each other so that we can go after these issues, and holding those in positions, those that are in charge of signing policies and passing policies through, so that we can hold them accountable. And there's strength in numbers. So when we show up together, things usually kind of work out on our behalf in that way. Also equipping communities to know your rights, education and advocacy training. And I always say that when we become knowledgeable, and I believe if more people were knowledgeable of the system, that things will be done differently. If someone knew the trap that the system is, that it's a trap set up for you, then you will be just less likely to take certain actions and do certain things. Now I know there are some things that like you talked about, somebody may steal for food if they don't have the money, or when their child needs something, they might be caught stealing. I'm not necessarily those situations, but if we were more educated with the policies and with the judicial system, I do believe that will work better on our behalf. And also building coalitions through like cross sectors, like faith, labor unions, student organizations, everybody coming together instead of trying to work at this apart or in silos. A lot of people would say, if everybody come together to do it together, I think it's just stronger when we show up together. And especially when we're talking about holding those in leadership, those in office accountable, I think it's better when we go at this and do this together.
Right, Jeremy. Thank you, Lisa.
Well, I appreciate everybody tonight. This has been very informative, and we really like to thank you all for joining us for this dynamic conversation. And we hope you will join us for Change in Motion and All of Us or None's upcoming events. Again, all of you will be emailed. The links dropped in the link, and the recording will be available soon. We appreciate everybody. Thank you so much, Lisa and Waleisah, for your wonderful time tonight and information. And we hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful night.